Silence is not the absence of life, but often its most profound expression. When boys and men fall quiet, it is not always surrender. It can be the soul's way of whispering truths that words cannot hold. We live in a world that praises noise, yet overlooks the sacred stillness where identity wrestles with meaning, where burdens are carried in silence so heavy it bends the spirit. This quiet is not weakness. It is a pause in the great rhythm of existence, an interlude in the symphony we are all part of. Perhaps what they need is not to be told to speak louder, but to be reminded that their voice is already woven into the fabric of life, that they belong even in their silence. For every pause is part of a larger song, and every life, no matter how muted, plays an irreplaceable note in the eternal music of creation. Silence, that pause between breaths where everything feels heavy, but nothing is said. That's the silence so many boys and men are living in right now. It's not that they don't have anything to say. It's that they've been carrying so much for so long, and somewhere along the way, the world taught them that speaking doesn't always change the weight. We live in a culture that worships noise. Think about how loud everything is. Social media shouting at us, ads screaming for our attention, voices everywhere telling us who to be, what to do, how to live. The world celebrates the ones who shout the loudest, who brand themselves, who sell their stories. But what happens to the ones who don't know how to scream over the crowd? What happens to the ones who are drowning in expectations, but feel like no one really wants to hear their truth? They fall silent, not because they're weak, not because they've given up on life, but because their silence is the only place they feel safe. Silence is not empty. It's full of stories never told, full of questions never asked, full of grief, of pressure, of quiet prayers whispered into the dark. When a man goes quiet, it's rarely because he has nothing to say. More often, it's because he has too much inside and nowhere to put it. That silence becomes a survival strategy, a shield, a way of saying, I can't keep fighting battles I'm not allowed to name. I want you to picture this. A young boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old. He gets hurt, physically, emotionally, maybe just disappointed. And what's the first thing he hears? Oh, don't cry. Be strong. Shake it off. The message sinks in and he carries it forward. By the time he's a teenager, he already believes that silence equals strength, that swallowing pain is the only acceptable option. Fast forward 20 years, and you've got a man who knows how to smile when he's breaking, who knows how to show up at work when his soul is unraveling, who knows how to hold everything in so well that even the people closest to him don't see the cracks. That's the silence we're talking about here. The silence beneath the noise. The silence that doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening, but no one else can hear it. And the tragedy is this. When we look at that silence from the outside, we misinterpret it. We call it apathy. We call it laziness. We say he's checked out. He doesn't care anymore. But that's not the truth. The truth is, silence can be the sound of someone carrying more than they can name. It can be the sound of someone trying not to break under the weight of expectation, shame, and exhaustion. You know what I think? Silence is sometimes a man's most honest cry for help. It's just that we don't recognize it because we're too busy expecting noise. But imagine if we treated that silence not as absence, but as presence. Imagine if, instead of saying, what's wrong with you? We said, I see you. I know you're carrying something. Imagine if we leaned in, not to fill the silence with advice or solutions, but to simply hold space. Because silence doesn't mean someone has disappeared. Silence means they're still here, still holding on, still hoping, in some unspoken way, that someone will notice without them having to shout. And here's the paradox. Silence isn't always despair. Sometimes silence is where the soul is working things out. Sometimes silence is where meaning is being built. Sometimes silence is where the deepest transformation happens. And yet, silence can also be the place where someone feels the most invisible. That's why this matters. Because when boys and men go quiet, it's not just their story that gets lost. It's ours too. Every voice is a thread in the human fabric. When even one thread goes missing, the whole tapestry changes. Their silence isn't just theirs, it affects us all. I want you to think about your own life. Think about the times you've gone quiet, the times you didn't have the words, the times you thought no one would understand. So when boys and men fall silent, we can't just demand they speak up. That's like demanding music without respecting the pauses. Instead, we have to listen to the silence, because in that silence lives the truth of who they are, what they've endured, and what they're still becoming. And maybe, just maybe, the silence isn't something to fear. Maybe it's something sacred, a reminder that even in the quietest moments, life is still speaking. The silence beneath the noise is never empty. It is always telling us something. There's something invisible pressing down on boys and men that we rarely talk about. It's not just the obvious stress of work, money, or family. It's the weight of expectation. And these expectations are so quiet, so woven into the fabric of our culture that most of the time they don't even notice they're carrying them. But the body notices. The mind notices, the spirit notices, and over time, that invisible weight takes its toll. From the very beginning, they're handed a script. Be strong, be fearless, provide, protect. Don't show weakness, don't cry, don't fail. And here's the thing, the script doesn't say who wrote it, and it doesn't leave room for edits. It just demands performance, day after day, after year. And when they stumble, when life doesn't match the impossible standard, they don't just feel like they've fallen short. They feel like they are a failure. Failure. That's not a burden. That's a cage. You can see it in the way they move through the world. The man who keeps pushing even when he's exhausted because slowing down feels like losing. The teenager who hides his depression behind a smile because vulnerability feels like betrayal. The father who feels crushed by the pressure to provide, but doesn't dare admit it because the story says he's supposed to hold everyone else up. And that's the weight of invisible expectations. And what makes it heavier is that society rewards the performance, the strong, silent type, the one who doesn't complain, the one who achieves, the one who keeps his emotions locked tight. We put those men on pedestals. But here's the irony. When they try to live up to that image, we don't see the cost. We don't see what it takes for them to hold themselves together while slowly unraveling on the inside. It's not just about pressure to succeed in the world. It's also about pressure to succeed at being the right kind of man. That pressure doesn't just limit them. It suffocates them. It tells them that their humanity, their doubts, their fears, their softness doesn't belong. And when you cut a person off from parts of themselves, you don't get strength. You get silence. I want you to really think about this. How often do you see a boy or a man rewarded for being real, for being vulnerable, for saying, I don't know what to do, or I'm scared, or even I need help? It's rare. What we reward instead is toughness, control, success without cracks. And so men learn early that their worth is conditional. They believe they are only as valuable as their ability to endure. But here's the truth nobody tells them. Those expectations are illusions. They were invented. They are not the measure of a life. And yet, when those illusions are enforced long enough, they become chains. Chains that keep boys from crying when they're young. Chains that keep men from opening up when they're hurting. Chains that keep fathers from admitting, I don't have it all figured out. Chains so heavy that silence starts to feel like the only way to survive. And it's not just their silence we should be concerned about. It's what happens in the silence. In that quiet, unspoken space, men begin to disappear into themselves. They begin to believe that they're alone in their struggles, that no one would understand if they spoke, that they're failing some unwritten test of manhood. And so, little by little, they stop showing up fully. They become shadows of themselves, present, but not alive. But here's where the conversation has to shift, because we often approach this problem by saying, just open up, just talk, just share. But let's be honest, that's asking men to break through decades of conditioning overnight. That's asking them to push against walls that have been reinforced since childhood. It's not that simple. If the world truly wants boys and men to open up, then the world has to change what it expects of them. It means teaching young boys that strength isn't about shutting down your feelings, it's about understanding them. It means telling men that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's courage. It means redefining success, not as the ability to carry everything alone, but as the ability to live in truth and authenticity. It means creating spaces where men are not just allowed to be human, but celebrated for it. Because here's the irony. The very things we call weakness in men, their emotions, their honesty, their need for connection, are the things that make them most alive. Those are the things that keep them grounded, resilient, connected to the world around them. When we strip them of those things, we don't make them stronger. We make them lonelier. And let's not forget, the weight of invisible expectations doesn't just harm men, it harms everyone around them. Families suffer when fathers can't share their truth. Relationships break when partners feel shut out. Communities weaken when men withdraw into silence. We all lose when we tell half of humanity to hide their humanity. But there's another way. It begins with listening differently. It begins with challenging the scripts. It begins with recognizing that silence isn't always a man's choice. It's a reflection of the box we've put him in. And once we see that, we can begin to loosen the weight. We can begin to remind them that they don't have to earn their worth, that their value is never tied to performance, but to existence. And that changes everything. Because when the weight comes off, the silence begins to shift. It doesn't have to be broken with a roar. Sometimes it starts with a whisper. Sometimes it starts with a breath. Sometimes it starts with a man finally believing, I don't have to pretend anymore. And in that moment, the cage opens. Invisible expectations are the heaviest chains of all, but once they're named, they can finally be broken. There's a language we've forgotten how to hear. A language that doesn't use words, doesn't need sound, and yet carries the deepest truths we'll ever know. It's the language of the soul. And when boys and men go quiet, this is often the language they're speaking. We mistake silence for absence, but silence is full. It's full of the unspoken. Full of the ache of dreams deferred, of disappointments carried, of questions that have no easy answers. And here's the paradox. Silence can be both a wound and a medicine. It can be the place where pain hides, and it can also be the place where healing begins. Think about your own life. Haven't there been times when words just weren't enough? Times when explaining how you felt would have only cheapened the truth of it? That's because there are parts of us that don't speak in sentences. They speak in moments, in pauses, in breath. That's the soul's language. And yet, in our culture, we've lost the ability to honor it. We live in a world that demands translation. Say what you mean. Explain yourself. Be clear. But the soul doesn't move that way. The soul speaks in whispers, not headlines. It speaks in metaphors, not bullet points. And when boys and men go quiet, maybe it's because the soul is saying something words simply cannot hold. Send. Picture this. A man sitting in his car after work, the engine off, the silence so thick it feels alive. He stares at the steering wheel, trying to gather himself before he walks inside. Outwardly, nothing's happening. But inwardly, there's a storm. His soul is wrestling. Am I enough? Does anyone see me? Is this all there is? Those questions aren't weaknesses. They're invitations. Invitations to deeper meaning, to connection, to truth. But if we only listen for words, we miss the conversation entirely. Here's the tragedy. We've trained men to distrust that inner language. From the time they're little, they're told to think rationally, act logically, keep emotions in check. But the soul doesn't live in logic. The soul lives in longing. The soul lives in wonder. The soul lives in silence. So when they feel something stirring inside, they often dismiss it, suppress it, or bury it under busyness. And slowly they lose fluency in their own inner voice. But the soul doesn't stop speaking just because we stop listening. It gets louder in other ways. Anxiety, restlessness, a sense of emptiness that no success can fill. And if that voice is ignored long enough, silence becomes not just a coping mechanism. It becomes a prison. What if we reframed this silence? What if we stopped seeing it as a void and started seeing it as a sacred space? What if instead of pressuring boys and men to always say what's wrong, We gave them permission to sit in the silence, to let the soul speak in its own way. That doesn't mean ignoring the struggle. It means recognizing that meaning is not always verbal. Healing is not always loud. Growth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's born in stillness. And isn't that true for all of us? Some of the most transformative moments in life don't come with speeches. They come in silence. Standing at the ocean's edge, watching the sun rise, holding the hand of someone you love without saying a word. The soul speaks in those moments. It says, "This is sacred. Pay attention." So when men grow quiet, maybe the question isn't, won't you talk? Maybe the question is, what is your soul saying in this silence? That's a radically different kind of listening. It's listening without demand, listening without judgment, listening with reverence for the mystery that's unfolding inside another human being. Because here's what I know. When you give someone the safety to let their silence be heard, you open the door for their soul to return to its own language. And eventually, that silence may give birth to words, but words rooted in truth, not performance. Words that come not from obligation, but from authenticity. And here's the beautiful part. When a man reconnects with that inner voice, when he begins to trust the forgotten language of the soul, everything shifts. His silence is no longer a cage. It becomes a sanctuary, a place of reflection, a place of renewal. Instead of disappearing into it, he emerges from it more whole, more alive, more attuned to the song of his own existence. This is what they need to hear. Their silence is not shameful. Their silence is not weakness. Their silence can be sacred. It can be the place where they meet themselves again, the place where they remember they are not just machines built to perform, but souls woven into the fabric of a living, breathing universe. And isn't that the deeper truth? We are not here just to function. We are here to feel, to connect, to wonder, to create. And sometimes the soul must go quiet so it can remind us of that. So the next time you encounter the silence of a boy, a man, or even your own silence, don't rush to fill it. Don't rush to fix it. Let it be. Listen differently. Honor it, because that silence might be the most honest expression of the soul's voice. And if we can learn to hear it, to truly hear it, then silence will no longer be the sound of giving up. It will be the sound of coming home. Silence, when honored, is not the absence of life. It is the soul reminding us of who we truly are. Life has a rhythm. You feel it when you listen closely enough. A pulse beneath the surface of everything. And just like music, life isn't made of sound alone. It's made of the spaces in between, the pauses, the tension, the release. When boys and men go silent, when they withdraw, it might look like the end of the song. But what if it isn't? What if that silence is just one movement in the larger symphony of growth? Struggle has always been part of the human story. Look at nature. A seed pushes against the weight of the soil before it ever sees the sun. A river carves stone only through pressure and persistence. Even the stars, we forget that every single one was born out of chaos, out of the fiery collapse of something before it. Growth doesn't come in spite of struggle. Growth is struggle transformed into something beautiful. But here's where it gets tricky. We're not taught to see struggle this way. We're taught to avoid it, to fight it, to see it as failure. And for men especially, the script says, if life feels hard, you must be doing it wrong. Retta, if you're struggling, you're not strong enough. That belief is crushing because the truth is, struggle isn't evidence of weakness. It's proof of becoming. Think about the quiet moments when life has pushed you to your knees. The heartbreak, the failure. The nights you couldn't sleep because the weight of it all pressed so heavy on your chest. In those moments, it's easy to believe you're finished. Easy to believe you're alone. But what if those moments weren't endings? What if they were passages? What if the silence wasn't emptiness, but the soil where something new is quietly taking root? When men withdraw, it often looks like giving up. But maybe it's not giving up. Maybe it's the necessary pause between chapters, the silence between the notes that makes the music richer. The cocoon that looks like death from the outside, but inside is an unseen transformation. We have to stop treating silence and struggle like detours. They are not detours. They are the path. They are woven into the cosmic dance that is shaping each of us into who we're meant to become. Here's what I believe. The universe has never wasted a struggle. Not once. Every difficulty carries within it a hidden seed of growth. The question is not, why am I struggling? And yet, when men fall silent under the weight of it all, the danger is they forget this. They forget that their struggles are not signs of failure, but signs that life is asking them to grow. They mistake the pause for the ending, when really it's just the in-between, the part of the song where the tension builds before the release. Think of it this way. A symphony without tension, without dissonance, without moments of silence would be flat and forgettable. What makes music moving is not perfection. It's contrast. It's the clash of notes, the rise and fall, the quiet and the crescendo. Isn't life the same? And isn't it true that your greatest breakthroughs have often come right after your darkest nights? That the very challenges you thought would destroy you became the very soil out of which something new grew? This isn't just philosophy. It's reality. Every single person sitting here is proof. You've survived things you once thought you couldn't. And in the process, you became someone deeper, stronger, more awake. That's why we cannot dismiss the silence of boys and men as weakness. That silence may be the soil of transformation. It may be the place where life is doing its deepest work. What they need to hear is this. You are not broken for struggling. You are being remade by it. Imagine if we told men that. Imagine if we said, your silence isn't your ending, it's your becoming. Your struggle isn't proof that you're failing. It's proof that life is shaping you for something more. How different would their story sound? Because when you reframe struggle as part of the dance, silence as part of the song, suddenly life looks different. Suddenly, there's no shame in pausing. No shame in retreating for a while. No shame in letting the silence do its work. And here's the most beautiful part. When you lean into the rhythm, when you trust the dance, you realize you're not struggling alone. Your life is woven into something larger. The universe itself is a symphony of struggle and release, of birth and death, of silence and sound. Yes, you are part of that grand music. So when a man goes silent, when he feels lost in the weight of it all, he needs to be reminded, this is not the end of your story. This is a movement in the larger song. Trust it. Let it shape you. Let it teach you. Let it teach you. Because on the other side of this silence, something is waiting to emerge. And maybe, just maybe, the silence itself is proof that life hasn't given up on you. It's preparing you for the next note. Struggle is not the end. It is the rhythm of becoming, the silence between the notes that makes the music of your life worth hearing. When boys and men go quiet, the most dangerous lie they begin to believe is that they are alone, that no one could possibly understand what they're carrying, that their silence is a wall no one can see through, and behind it, they are isolated, invisible. That belief doesn't just weigh them down, it suffocates them. But here's the truth they need to hear. You are not alone. You never have been. Every human being knows what it feels like to struggle, to doubt themselves, to wonder if they belong. Loneliness tries to convince us that we are uniquely broken. But in reality, loneliness is the thread that connects us all. The irony is breathtaking. What makes us feel separate is actually what makes us the same. And yet, so many men don't know this. They're taught to carry everything silently, to hold their pain tight, to grit their teeth and push through. And the cost of that is enormous. Because the moment you believe you're the only one, you stop reaching for connection. You stop reaching for help, reaching for life. You stop reaching for life itself. I want you to think about the last time you felt truly seen, not just noticed, not just acknowledged, but deeply seen. Maybe it was a conversation with someone who listened without judgment. Maybe it was a moment when you admitted a truth you had carried alone for years, and instead of rejection, you were met with compassion. In that moment, the heaviness didn't vanish, but it became lighter because it was no longer yours alone. That is the power of belonging. That is the medicine for the silence. So many men never get to taste that. They've been conditioned to think that connection is weakness, that asking for help is failure, that vulnerability is a risk they can't afford. But the irony is this. What they fear will expose them is actually what will save them. And here's the deeper truth. They don't need to be fixed. They don't need the world to hand them a checklist for how to get better. They just need to be reminded that they are not walking through this life alone. Or asserting that their silence is not invisible, that their presence matters, that even if they don't say a word, their life is felt, their existence ripples through the lives of others. Imagine what would change if every man knew that. Imagine if instead of carrying the crushing belief that no one could understand, he carried the unshakable knowledge that he belongs. That there is space for his story, space for his silence, space for his becoming. This is not about coddling. It's about connection. Because when a man realizes he is not alone, the silence shifts. It doesn't vanish instantly. It softens. It begins to open. It becomes less like a prison and more like a doorway. I've seen it happen. A man who has held everything in for decades finally admits, I'm not okay. And instead of judgment, he's met with someone who says, me too. That moment cracks the silence. It allows light to come in. And often that's enough to keep him moving forward. Not because the struggle disappeared, but because now he knows he doesn't have to carry it by himself. And here's the truth. Connection doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as sitting in silence with someone and knowing they're there. Sometimes it's a text message that says, I'm thinking of you. Sometimes it's eye contact that says, I see you. Men don't need grand solutions. They need to know that they are part of something bigger, that they are tethered to life through relationships, through presence, through love. The silence tells them they're cut off. What they need to hear is, you're still connected, even in your quiet, even in your struggle. Even in the moments you think no one notices, you matter. And let's be honest, this isn't just about men. Every single one of us has moments where we feel like we're on an island. But the truth is, we're all part of the same ocean. Different waves, same water. The belief that we are separate is an illusion. The reality is that we are deeply, profoundly interconnected. That's why this message is so important. Because when boys and men hear that they're not alone, it disrupts the lie that has been eating at them from the inside. It gives them permission to stay, permission to breathe, permission to keep going. And if you're sitting here right now thinking of someone in your life who has gone quiet, someone who has pulled back, someone who has disappeared into silence, I want you to remember this. You don't have to have the perfect words. You don't have to have the perfect plan. What matters most is that they know they are not alone, that you see them, that you are with them, even in the silence. Because sometimes the difference between despair and hope is not a long speech. It's not advice. It's simply presence. It's the reminder that the silence doesn't mean abandonment. It doesn't mean invisibility. It means the soul is searching, and the soul searches better when it's not searching alone. So if there's one truth men need to hear above all else, it's this. You are not alone. You never were. You never will be. Even in the silence you are seen, you are felt. And you belong. There comes a moment in every man's life when he asks, often in silence, a question that rattles the soul. What is my place in all of this? And when the weight of expectations, the pressure of performance, and the ache of unspoken struggles pile up, that question can feel unbearable. Because if you believe you don't matter, if you believe your presence is irrelevant, silence turns into surrender. But here's what they need to hear. Your role in this life is sacred. Your place in the greater whole is irreplaceable. So the next time you wonder if you belong, if you matter, if your voice makes any difference, remember this. The universe has never created anything unnecessary. Not a single star, not a single heartbeat. Not you. Your life is not a question mark in the cosmos. It is a note in the eternal symphony, and without it, the song is incomplete.